Welcome to the Calvary Young Adult Podcast. My name is Michael Field, and we are doing a special podcast series to go along with our sermon series that's coming up. It's called The Lies We Believe and the Stories We Tell. And the premise behind this really is that as human beings created in the image of God, we're unique in all of creation. And unique in the sense that we can imagine things that don't exist yet. So it's this idea that like this camera that's filming me or this microphone that's picking up my voice, these things didn't exist and human beings imagined these things and were able to create them. And that makes us different in all of creation from anything else in God's creation. And I think that's just a powerful thing that God has wired into us. And so it's powerful on one hand, but then on the other hand, it can be pretty destructive because just like we can imagine beautiful things and create them and base our lives on those things, we can also imagine things that aren't true. And those are called lies. And what this series is really about is about diving into the lies that we tend to believe and the stories that we live out of those lies in our lives, the way we live those lies out. It's really focusing on that Romans 12:2, like do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be renewed, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, this idea that we're transforming our minds. So that's what we're talking about. We are going to get, and just as a heads up, this is a lot of inspiration for this is from a book called Live No Lies by John Mark Comer. So if you're interested in diving deeper into this idea, that's a great book that you could check out. We want to do some introductions here, and to start our time together, we invited, both Pastor Sarah and I invited our spouses into the mix. So that's super exciting for us. So we're going to go around, and so we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we have a question of the day. We figured no better way to like get really intimate and authentic than inviting our spouses into the mix with us, and they're just incredible human beings too. But the question of the day is, what is both an idiosyncrasy or like something that you like think is cute or love about your spouse that other people might not know about, and then what is a pet peeve about your spouse that people might not know about? So, babe, tell us your name.
My name is Faith.
Yeah.
And the idiosyncrasy that I kind of like, I feel like it's funny.
Kind of, wow.
It is really funny is how you are constantly doing a fake golf swing. Wherever you
That's
go.
a field boy.
Yeah, it is.
You just gotta get it right.
It's like
Sizing it up.
Gotta get it right.
everywhere. Yeah, he's practicing his golf swing.
Okay.
And then something that I find annoying, your gum chewing can be aggressive, but
Yakkish.
Michael leaves empty bags and containers everywhere. So like.
No, but it's like there's like 5% of it's left.
No.
It'll be like 5% of
You
chips.
can't get rid of it.
I can't get rid of it.
It's not time.
And then it's just sitting there, and then we don't know that there's actually none of that thing left in the cupboard.
It's deceptive.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's
Deceptive.
bad. It's bad.
That's deep.
It's deep.
And it's
It's
been
bad.
happening for all 14 years of our
Yes.
marriage. So
Guilty as charged.
yes,
Guilty as
that's
charged.
probably.
Those kind of both felt like pet peeves. But we'll move on.
Move on. Should I go?
Actually, go. Let's have Tim go.
Let's introduce my
Okay.
wonderful husband.
Yeah.
All right, I'm Tim, and I have the pleasure of being married to Sarah. And something about Sarah that she's probably already done since this has started is that I can be doing something or listening to something, watching something, and if anything cute or semi-inspirational has happened, I can feel her looking at me. I can feel her eyes like magnetized to my face, waiting for me to look over, and she'll just be smiling. And so I guess she really appreciates and wants to share in on
share the joy.
the nice things. And she'll go, "That's so nice." And so she'll always say that. A pet peeve is, as a long-torsoed individual, I wear shirts that sometimes aren't as long as they need to be. So Sarah will tug my shirt down.
Graciously adjust him.
Yeah, she's looking out for me, but at the same time, I'm just like, okay, whoa.
Just
Yeah.
get your
It's
shirt
momish.
tugged off.
It's momish.
momish.
It's like, give me a
It's
little
not
warning
like
about
that.
this. But sometimes she'll even lift it up and pull it down. Like,
Well,
you're not helping. This is
she has to make sure you're not wearing a
Yeah.
top.
Well, it's
I understand,
funny.
but-
It's funny because my pet peeve is when you let your midriff. So it makes sense. It's a symbiotic
That's
relationship.
amazing.
Yeah, well, there's
That's crazy.
Oh, that's good.
And then what's the idiosyncrasy?
Oh, okay. The idiosyncrasy that I love about Tim is that he will sing me silly songs a lot when I like. So it's usually like something about like his wife. So it'll be like, I love my wife, and like just will go off, and it's every morning and every evening.
They're not good songs.
They're not. Yeah, no.
That's sweet though.
He
That
will-
is sweet.
He
find
can
them all
write
as we go.
amazing music, but no,
That's
he will
sweet.
just get really excited and sing to me in our kitchen.
I love
So
that.
That's very
I
good.
think that's really sweet, and I like a lot. Another signature thing I feel like I tap to throw in is if Tim is like focused on something or if he's watching sports and really excited, he will like start making a pretend fire, and it's like everyone back home knows that about
I love
him.
it.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
That's good.
I would say that mine. I'll start. I liked how you started low and
Yeah,
end
yeah,
on the
I'm
high.
gonna end on a-
Yeah, you end on the high.
I'm gonna look
So
up.
the pet peeve with Faith would be, I got a couple. It takes her like 5 hours to drink a coffee. Like that's crazy to me. And it's always iced coffee, so it just
Same.
goes so
It's
slow.
true.
It's
The other one is when we get home from anywhere, she like won't leave the car right away.
oh,
Like
you're
she's a lingerer in the car, and I just want to go in the house, and she's like on her
It's a
phone.
big transition.
Yeah, it is a big
It's full
transition. It's like the
transition.
dogs are gonna bark.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to pet them. It's
Yeah,
like, it's
so
important. Yeah.
that's a full transition. And idiosyncrasy. I said this in a sermon a couple weeks ago. When you think something's like really, really funny because you get a smile that gets bigger than a normal smile,
Aww.
and your gums show, and it's the cutest thing. You're kind of doing it right now, which we were laughing because she has a false tooth in right now. She's getting some
Temporary.
dental work done, temporary false tooth. So if you notice a
there's
little
not
false
her
tooth,
normal
not her
smile.
normal
Not my
smile.
normal
It's
smile.
usually very elevated.
Yeah,
is
thank
perfect.
you. Doing weird things with my mouth.
Okay, so now that we've introduced ourselves,
I feel like I should say something that I love about you that's different than
that's kind
your
of
golf
it.
swing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He dances and all the time, a lot, and I love that about him. Because,
Aw.
especially because I feel like he's a good dancer and he dances like
Show it off, man.
with
Yeah,
everyone,
yeah.
but I feel like I get like the interpretive dance. I get the
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know,
It's true.
yeah,
Thanks,
I love
I
that.
appreciate
It's
that.
silly goofy.
Coming back
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, coming back around.
We went double negative and then one positive.
Yeah.
It's good.
Sorry
Cool.
about that.
So we're just gonna dive into the shallow end here. Really easy opening question.
Softball.
So the formula of this whole series on a week by week basis, we're gonna have a topic and we're gonna talk about the lie that we tend to believe about that topic. So for this week, we're gonna be talking about ourselves, like our own personal identity. And so the question is what's one lie you tend to believe about yourself? Like I said, super shallow, not a big deal at all, but what's one lie you tend to believe about yourself? You know cognitively in your head, like it's not true, whatever, you know the word of God, but like left to your own devices, left in those moments where, nobody else is around or you're just not in a great place, like what's a lie you tend to believe? I'll start. I'm going to model
That's
for
nice.
us to start so we
Leaders
can
go first.
warm the water up, warm the deep end up. If there's a lie I tend to believe about myself, it's that I am not significant and that my voice doesn't matter. It's this idea that whether I show up or not, it doesn't matter if I walk into a room or not. I don't have impact. Like my presence doesn't equal impact. And I think that's something that I've struggled with. This is gonna be free therapy for all of us
Yeah.
today. So
Yeah.
we're gonna get all of our therapy on.
It's gonna get her hours.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think for me, you can trace these lies back, right? Whether they come from, a family wound or a father wound or a mother wound, or maybe it's with a friendship early on in your life or loss that we experienced. And I think for me, and I can say this, I have a fantastic relationship with my parents at this point. But they got a divorce when I was 14 years old, 13 years old, pretty formative age in your life. And I think in that time, it was like my brothers were off at college, I was still in school and in 8th grade. And at that time of my life, it was this feeling that like everybody was kind of dealing with their own things. And I was left with just navigating this new world, right? This new reality. And I think there was just something about that season that made it feel like what I needed in that time wasn't as important or valuable or like that it didn't matter, right? And so I think that translated into me being like, well, I'll just be here to kind of keep the peace and to not raise my voice that this is like really, really hard. Because it feels like everybody else is kind of going through it right now. And so I think that's where it came from for me. And it's something that I've dealt with ever since in some way, shape, or form. So that's mine. I feel like that's the lie that I tend to believe, and that's where it comes from.
Has the Lord ever kind of leveraged that redemptively at any point? Like as you became aware of it and He's worked in it, have you seen?
I think so. It's such a good question. I think for me, it's been, I think even the journey of like preaching, I think of that, of like using my voice and saying like, I'm going to fill up space. And like my voice does matter. I think in meeting and like truly coming to know Jesus, like I think that was the thing that like He impressed upon my heart and my mind so early on, is like, you matter so much. Like that message of like adoption, the message of like, I created you in your mother's womb, the message of like every number, like on every hair in your head is numbered, like all of those threads or themes throughout the Bible just landed so hard in my life at like 16, 17 years old. And I feel like like at that moment, I feel like that was like, oh, I will use my voice because it does matter. That doesn't mean I'm just like superhero, conquered it, good to go, moved on. It's like those initial lies or those bigger lies that we hold on to can be like magnetic or like, like a magnetic pole that we kind of like trend towards or come back to. So it's something that I feel like I have to constantly remind myself of.
I think what's crazy is like, obviously we've known each other a long time, like 20 years now, and he's had influence in every room he walks in. So that's what's so crazy is like, that's the place you struggle, but I've watched it and it's like every room you go in, people want to hear what you have to say. And, I feel like that's something, a gift God gave you, and yet that's where you struggle. It's just crazy.
Isn't that crazy? And you've been so, like in our marriage, it's like, I feel like she's been so encouraging. You've been so encouraging in my life and reminding my life. And sometimes like having to like light a fire under me of like, you matter. Like your voice matters. Use your voice. Like if you're going to show up in a room, like use it, And I feel like that's such a gift of not only marriage, but of like community to have those people who know those lies and can like call you up and out of those and remind you of who you are and how God's created and called you. So it's a big deal. That's me.
Yeah.
Enough about me in the moment.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. And I think just something as you were talking, when I was in college, I remember a pastor preaching on like, how do we replace lies with truth? And he pointed out, and I'm anticipating that this is going to be true of all of us, is usually our greatest areas of weakness become our greatest places of inheritance in the kingdom. And the enemy just goes after what's valuable. And even just knowing you for a short time, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Because I see that magnetism and that influence and how you use your voice. And I'm excited to kind of learn from the two of you too. And I think it's, the enemy hates the good gifts in us and will go after what is good and true. So
that's such a good reminder. What about you, Sarah? What's a lie that you tend to believe about yourself?
There have been many throughout the years, and I think the one that probably in the past like 5 or 6 years I've been most affected by sounds so silly because it's like the antithesis of the gospel, but it's the lie that I'm not lovable. And this kind of manifests in the way that I love people and I love taking care of people. And I think even from the time I was young, just like kind of hid behind that because I was like, people don't really get to know me, but they feel really loved by me. Then they'll know that I care about them and they'll love the feeling of being with me, but they don't have to get under the surface. And I think that was something when I first got married to Tim, I think it was on our honeymoon, I broke down and I asked him do you like me? And it wasn't anything that he did. It was more just feeling, I've never felt that vulnerable with someone, and it was just almost little Sarah just kind of going back and being just through some things that happened in my childhood, being man, I think it was hard for me to believe that people just love me for not what I do, but who I am and not what I could do for them. So that I still have to work through, especially being in like a helping profession.
Yeah.
And like we're the people that people go to, you know, you're going into therapy and counseling. Tim has been in ministry for a very long time. And that I have to separate that from my identity of like, if I stop being a pastor, people will just love me because of our history, because of how God sees me. But that's probably my big lie at the moment.
Which again, like, reflecting back to you, like, you were so beloved, like, in this community, and so beloved by so many people. I think the question that I have for you is, as a pastor and as somebody who, again, pastors so well, like, I see you pastor people so well. Like, you pastored me earlier today. I was sharing about something that, like, Faith and I are, you know, going through with just a health thing on her side of the family, and you're like, can we stop and pray about that right now? Like, you're just such a good pastor. How do you navigate that lie and pastor so well all at the same time?
It's so, I feel like it's such an interesting dichotomy, because it really is easy for me to look at other people, and like Tim has the gift of faith for his life and for like kind of just in general, and I feel like I have the gift of faith for other people's lives, like it's because I believe, I'm like, I know God is good, I know that he loves, like I feel like I really have the gift of mercy and compassion, so I really genuinely like coming alongside people, but I think it's just this weird self-deception that I have to like kind of come away and really like guard my time with God and my intimacy with God, because I could feel the disconnect when like I start working more like workspace versus grace space, and that's usually when I'm not spending time with God, when I'm not slowing down. And Tim's been really helpful reminding me of like, you can just rest, like, or like in friendships, like I get so worked up if I feel like I'm not performing well in a friendship, and or like, oh, I didn't check in on them, and Tim's like, you need to trust your friends and trust that people love you, and that love is endurant, and it's not, you know, like fickle, but that's kind of, that's, I try to balance that, but I can feel it wearing on my spirit when I'm like, oh, I'm not actually like receiving from the Father, I'm just going and working. So
that makes sense. How did that honeymoon conversation go?
I was going to ask that.
I mean, it was intense, you know. It was emotion filled to start with, you know. So it was, you know, for me, just trying to be steady, you know, and even embody, you know, the reality of how God sees Sarah, how I see Sarah, and you know, just let her know, like, hey, I'm here on purpose, you know. We got married on purpose, and you know, the Lord's put us together on purpose, and just reminding her of God's intentionality, I think, is the first place that I went, and what we kind of talked about, if I'm remembering that right.
Yeah. I think Tim has always been really good at meeting me very non-judgmentally, and like being steady and reiterating the truth of like, I'm not going anywhere, like I'm choosing you, like I love you, you know, and it's because I think it can feel shameful to ask for assurance, especially I'm like, we just got married, and I'm like asking you for assurance, if you know, because you started to see, I think, what I considered like the uglier sides, like me and my doubt and my fear and all of that.
So when he gave you that assurance, how did it feel?
I think it was really scary at first. I felt so
did you believe him?
I think I did, and I think it takes time, like we said before. Like there's definitely
making it your reality.
Yeah, it takes time to make it reality, and the irony of that whole thing is like we go on this honeymoon to rest, and I think when I slowed down, and John Markham talks about this, all those emotions come up, all that anxiety and doubt and depression, if you haven't addressed it. And we were going through one of the biggest life transitions you can go through, and moving and job stuff going on, and so I think I was also just like, man, I want to be like whole for him. I wish that he had married someone a little more stable at the time, which, you know, that's what's hard to receive, being like, no, I chose you. I'm like, but you didn't know it was going to be this rough.
And I kind of credit just all the good truth that I got, you know, whether it's from, you know, pastors or books or whatever, just the reality of how people are, you know. It's like, I didn't expect to marry a perfect person, so it made that transition a little easier, you know. It's like, this isn't shocking to me that you have levels of brokenness that I or other people haven't seen yet. Like, you're going to see it from me too.
I was kind of shocked that he wasn't shocked.
But like, that's such a beautiful picture of like community, and in this case it's marriage, right? And the fact that like the lies that drive our lives don't just like magically disappear when you
Right.
get in the community.
Yeah.
Right.
Like they don't just magically go away.
Or in marriage.
Or
Yeah,
in marriage.
didn't
Marriage
feel
exposes
yeah.
exactly. Like marriage
It's helpful. It
exposes
can be
them.
helpful,
Yes.
but it doesn't
Yeah.
cure everything.
It
Right.
doesn't cure everything, but it's like
Yeah.
the healing that does happen at the same time. So it's not like this like poof, it's gone,
Right.
but it's like the long, slow
Yeah.
healing of something
Yeah.
over time, and that like God in community gives us people who like
Yeah.
remind us of who He is,
Right.
who we are,
Yeah.
and like what's true and what's not true. And I think that's so much of life, of like in
Yeah.
community, of like reminding each other of like who you are, who God is, what's true and what's not true. And that's such a, I just thought that was such a beautiful picture of that. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
It's really beautiful.
What about you, Ben?
Oh gosh, I feel like I've had several lies too that I've believed over the years, but I think one consistent is just that I am not capable. Like I feel like I am not supposed to be in the rooms that I'm in, you know, or and it's weird because you know we can look back on my life and I've been a youth pastor, I've built businesses, like been, you know, by the world standards, like pretty successful but I just feel like an imposter all the time. Like I'm in this room, how did I get in this room? How did I get here? And people are gonna find out that I'm not capable and that I'm, you know, it's like I think I've like talked my way in or something, you know. So I think that's probably the lie.
So where do you think that lie came from?
It's a good question. I mean, I think being the third of 4 kids and my dad being a pastor, you know, it was just easy for me to fade into the background and, you know, it felt like no one really paid attention to me. But then my parents also didn't value achievement at all. So that wasn't something I ever.
Which is like awesome in some ways.
Yeah, in some ways. Like,
Yeah.
you know, my mom would tell me every day, God will use the weak things of this world to profound the wise, which is amazing. And yet, like, I grew up thinking I was really weak.
You're like so
you know?
super weak, huh?
Yeah, and so anyway, yeah, I think that's where that came from. And just, you know, I was just taught to try to be low key, you know, just don't try to be too big or too much. You know, I think as pastors' kids, we are always kind of like trying to balance what we should be,
Right.
you know, or
That's
how
so
we should
beautiful.
be. Yeah.
How do you feel like that, like, how do you feel like God has addressed that, either through scripture or through community or both, like over the years?
Yeah, I mean,
Because I was telling you this morning, it's like,
Yeah.
it's crazy that like that's the lie, because you've, like you said, you've like had 2 really successful different careers, and now you're attempting a third, which I think you're gonna be super successful in.
Yeah.
Just like the courage to go after those, knowing that like that's the lie, is
Yeah.
crazy.
I mean, I think it's definitely community, like having you in my life, just as like someone really stable. I think that's so helpful, because I'm such a fearful person. So to feel like I could fall back on somebody, if that makes sense, that was really helpful. And then I think just having like people in my life who are just cheering me on. I mean, when I decided I wanted to go back to school to be a therapist, well, I hadn't decided, and I called my friend Jasmine, and we were talking on the phone, and I told her about it, and she was like, Faith, you've got to do it. You have to do it. It doesn't matter if you're scared, you've got to do it scared. And so, and that pushed me over the edge. But even in my cohort, I've texted and had conversations with some of my friends telling them, hey, like, this is something I really struggle with.
Yeah.
And so if this could be a safe place for me to like ask all the questions that I think are stupid, you know, that would be great. And they have been so happy to be that for me. And it's like the only way I feel like I'm like making it through. So yeah. Yeah.
So much courage.
Seriously.
Being the lie, for sure. What about you, Tony? A lie you tend to believe.
Yeah, I had to think about this a lot, and unfortunately I came up with a few. But I think one that I think I'll speak on is just that I am not going to find my purpose and live it out. So that's like a really existential one, but it's like it really matters to me that I live my life the way that I ought to.
Yeah.
And I've just from even when I was really young, just been very existential. Like always had an awareness of eternity, like from day one. Like nobody had to convince me.
Yeah.
It was just hardwired in, and I know that's not the case for everybody, but it's kind of how I was, just kind of how I've always been, and just making sure that I found whatever it is that I need to do. That's just been of the utmost importance to me. And even in, college, I find myself involved in a lot of things, and I have a lot of different kind of hats that I wear, and I think it's just, just trying to figure out, are any of these things the thing, or is it a combination, but like just somehow navigating that I ended up the place that I was supposed to be is like what I struggle with, but the lie is that I won't find it, and I won't live a life that met my purpose. Yeah,
that's so real, and has such practical implications too, because it's like existential, but then it's like this is what you're talking about putting your hands to on a daily basis. Like when you talk about purpose, is it like connected to vocation for you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it for sure is. I mean, but I think through wrestling through that, it's just, I know my vocation's a massive, massive part of it. That, whatever my skills are going to be, or the application of my time through work, like that's a major part of it. But it's also like relational too. Like I think like community is a big part of my overall life calling too. And it's like trying to spin all the discs, all of them add up to what I'm like supposed to be here for. And I'm trying to like manage all those things the best I can. And sometimes I'm like, well,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and Tim is probably one of the most hardworking people I know, and he is very intentional. So like he doesn't just do things for the sake of doing them, and that was something I was really attracted to. Like he had vision and purpose in the things he was doing. So I think it's just that ironic thing of like you are someone of impact like relationally, or someone of impact like even if you're doing like a very behind the scenes job, there's somehow like it just overflows and affects so many people. And I think it's cruel of the enemy to take that and like make it a fear or weakness. But I've also been really proud of you for like, I think I've seen you overcome a lot of self-doubt in this past season by like just kind of submitting what you thought your dreams were, or like the things that you carried for so long and where you thought you'd end up. Because I think we all go through that at some point, but I think as someone who cares deeply and isn't flippant with their life, you're gonna be affected by that more. So it takes a lot more to lay it down and say, okay, God. But I've been proud of you through that process.
Do you feel like any of that comes from comparison? Like just comparing yourself to others or where other people are at?
It's interesting because I don't think it's as much of that as much as it is an internal achievement drive. It's less competitive and more of just like I need to reach my potential. I need to be who I need to be, and I need to figure that out. It is, I think I had to come to that conclusion that there was a difference. Like this is a me thing more. I think that happened through seeing that I wasn't in the same phase as a lot of my closest friends and family, and then realizing that and coming to peace with that, and then learning how to be happy for people in different phases. Like that was an evolution where I was originally very insecure, like, oh, most of my friends are on the East Coast where I'm from, and most of them have had kids for several years. And that's, I'm 24, 25 at the time, and they're getting married, having kids, and I'm not in that phase. Well, God had to kind of bring me through that to then learn how to appreciate that and be happy for it. But the desire to kind of, this whole purpose thing still was a struggle. And I think that kind of made clear, like, this is just kind of part of my hardwiring, I think.
Yeah, that's good.
I think the thing that's like resonating so much, like from all of our stories, and we were talking about this before a little bit, is like when you look at, like when you encounter each one of us, it's like, I was telling you, it's so obviously like that you're beloved, like you're so loved. Like it's so obvious that like this has been your third career that like I see you having success in. So this idea of like imposter syndrome, or like feeling like you're not competent and that being the lie, or like like purpose in my life, or like what am I called to do, like, and you have Sarah saying like you have so much intentionality to your life, and all of that, and me using my voice, like all of these things, like as people encounter us, those wouldn't be the first things that they would say about us at all. And I think that's the crazy thing about lies, is it's like these things that like have shaped and formed us deeply, but then you see, to your point earlier, like God's redemptive work.
Right.
Like this thing that like we struggle with so deeply, and then as you follow Jesus, as you pursue Jesus, and then you start to see God's redemptive work, to your point earlier, and those flat spots or those weak spots, in the words of your mom, like, you know, he's going to use the weak things of this world to confound the wise. Like, I'm just so struck by all of our overcoming, you know, like all of our overcoming in these places that were like deep, either childhood wounds or deep things that like were just embedded into us through our formation over the years. And as we bring those areas and like confess them to God, and as we bring those areas and take chances in community of like, do you really love me? Or like as we take chances in community, seeing what God does, and he turns those in to our testimony, right? And it's this idea that like we talk about all the time in Revelation, like we overcome the evil one, like by the blood of the Lamb and the power of our testimony. And I think that's what I'm struck with, like as we've shared these things that just feel like such weaknesses, or these lies that we tend to believe about ourselves, like how amazingly God has like worked in those areas. And I'm just super encouraged by it. I don't know about you all, but like, so encouraged. And I guess if you're listening, I think it would just be cool to talk to somebody this week. Like what's one lie you tend to believe about yourself, and open up, and with somebody that you trust, with somebody who's a follower of Jesus, that loves Jesus, and see what happens out of that conversation, and see how God shows up as we bring his truth to bear in those places in our lives.
100%. We're not meant to do in isolation. And the thing is, as I was thinking about this whole series, it's like there is going to be some truth to the lies we believe. It's like, think about the enemy in the desert with Jesus. He spoke half-truths. So even for myself, it's like, I'll speak to that of like, no, I'm not innately lovable without, you know, the power of Christ in my life and his righteousness covering me. Like, you don't have a purpose without God. Like, you're not competent. Like, you don't matter without the Lord. And I think what we're encouraging ourselves to do and our community is like to help God complete the sentence. Because that's what Jesus did.
So
He's like, oh, well, aren't you hungry? Here's some bread. He said, man will not live by bread alone. He finishes the sentence of the whole truth, and that's the only truth. There's no half-truths. Half-truth is a lie. So if you're even coming in a place where you're like, man, this is a little bit true. Maybe I need some help with this. That's why it's so important to go to someone that you trust. Like we've all done with each other, like in our marriages, and even say, hey, like, this is something that the Lord wants to grow in you and true team in you. And that keeps us humble as well to be like, we can't do, none of this is true without God. None of it.
To put a little poetic bow on it, it's one of my, as I've struggled through the whole purpose, lie, is there's a lyric that's kind of clarified this issue for me that I think kind of can clarify all of ours. It's how can we be ourselves if we don't know who we are? I'm looking for the one who made me. And in these kind of like absences of like truth, it leads us to search for truth, and ultimately truth is God. And if he's going to leverage these things so that we can know who he is more, then praise God.
Any last words, Bev?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was thinking about this morning, was just struck by the imperfect people God used throughout Scripture. So if you read the Bible, the people were so imperfect, and they were so weak. They were during that time when women weren't elevated or admired or, valued, he used women and he used kids and he used, David against Goliath, and so I think while we need to work on believing who God says we are, I think it is okay that we are weak. I think it is okay that, and I think he's going to use us despite our weakness,
That's so good. That's so good. So ask that question this week with your friends if you're listening, and help invite people to kind of complete that sentence with you and speak truth into that lie, and just encourage you to have the courage to open up something this week. So that's all we got. Stoked for next week is we're going to talk about a lie that we tend to believe about God. Be a juicy one. Cool.